Hello and welcome to our second ProCon webinar. I'm Will Kersham and I'm Chair of ProCon Nottinghamshire. ProCon has been connecting professionals in property and construction since 2018 in Nottinghamshire and now boasts a membership of 400 and more people. We hope that many of our members and those of ProCon Leicestershire have joined us today to listen to this webinar. However, we are always looking for new members to join the network. So if you're not a member and are interested in finding out more, please drop us an email at info@procon-nottinghamshire.co.uk or call us on 07803 126 807. Today, we're going to be looking into modern methods of construction, or MMC, what that means and how leading experts are facing this challenge. You'll be hearing from three fantastic speakers over the next hour who'll be sharing their insights and expertise with you. We'll also be hosting a live Q&A session at the end of the webinar with the assistance of Danielle from Cartwright Communications. Everyone you hear from throughout today's event will be available to answer your questions, so simply type yours into the box below and we'll be answering these in a little while. You can also use the upvote function if you see a particular question you'd like to know the answer to. So please make use of this and we'll be able to make sure we answer the questions that you are interested in. The UK construction sector is not only an incredibly significant part of our economy, but it's also an enabler of the wider economic growth and development, which helps the nation to function and to prosper. And due to ever-growing demand, it's vital that we come up with new and different ways to work to meet these requirements. So without further ado, let's hear from our first speaker, Andrew Prickett of Faithful Gould, who's going to give us an overview of MMC itself.
My name's Andrew Prickett. I'm the UK Head of Residential for Faithful Gould, who are part of the SNC Levelling Group. I'm based here in the East Midlands in Nottingham, although as per my title I have a UK role overseeing all our business activity in the residential sector. Today we're going to be talking predominantly around modern methods of construction, and from myself a particular focus on the emergence of MMC in the residential sector. MMC is nothing new. It's been around a number of years and a lot of people will be familiar with some of the post-war modern methods of construction sort of solutions. And unfortunately, a number of bad examples at that time. But in more recent years, particularly since around 2016, 2017, we've seen momentum growing in the use of modern methods of construction. That's partly fueled by some of the challenges that we're seeing around traditional routes to market for developers and contractors. I'm sure everyone's aware of the difficulties of sourcing the labour resources we need in this country. We have an ageing and a reducing labour resource in construction. So the need to look at doing things alternatively away from the traditional construction site has really been one of the catalysts. I think we've also seen government and a number of influencers and decision makers really get their shoulder behind MMC as well. So it wasn't that long ago in sort of 2016, 2017 that government wrote their white paper and clearly set out some objectives and some aims for MMC, particularly in the housing sector. And even myself wrote in the first quarter of 2017 that, you know, we need to accelerate and adapt and be prepared to do things differently, not to replace traditional construction, but to complement it, and so we can start achieving those targets set around housing of 300,000 homes per annum. So what government have done with a number of stakeholders, people like Homes England, Build Offsite and the like, is try and put some industry definition around that. And what they've created is quite a simple document that categorises modern methods of construction into 7 categories. Category 1 is the 3-dimensional solution, often referred to as sort of a volumetric solution. And it's something that Martin from Positive Homes will probably touch on later. I know he's got some very good experience of using that category in delivering his housing product. In regards to category 2, again, we're focusing on as much manufacturing away from the construction site as we can, but this would be a panelised system. And the benefits of panelised system is it's a bit more adaptable, it can be a bit more bespoke. Having said that, it's key to understand with off-site that we need a level of standardisation, because it's standardisation that helps productivity and the real factory process. But we've probably seen a number of good examples of category 2 in regards to 2D panelised systems, whether they be concrete, timber or steel, and there's a number of providers out in the market. In regards to category 3, we're more talking about components of the build, and I touched on these earlier with the examples of, say, a precast staircase or a pre-assembled roof structure. So we're not talking about the full build, we're just talking about breaking down the construction of a home or a school or an office building and looking at which parts of that build can be manufactured and then away from site and delivered to site and then installed. And then category 5, and you'll note I'll miss category 4 there, but I will come back to category 4. Category 5 is the pre-manufactured or assembly of non-structural components. So this is most commonly seen in regards to things like M&E risers, plant rooms, bathroom pod solutions, and these are being widely used now. So all of the build to rent apartment schemes, hotel schemes, purpose-built student accommodations we see in and around the East Midlands on site now will be using this sort of technology. And this is really helping with improving the quality of the installation, because it's now being built under a more controlled factory setting than the variables that we see on site. I did say I missed out category 4 there, and that's partly because up until today, category 4 has been less used than those other categories we've mentioned, but category 4 is all around off-site and site-based printing. So this is the ability to print components of the build, often non-structural components. But in more recent times, in particular because of COVID-19, we've seen digital printers used to produce the sort of PPE and health and safety equipment that are required in these current times, but are also required on a daily basis on every construction site around the UK. And that brings my segment of today's webinar to an end. There will be a chance for Q&A later, and I look forward to receiving your questions. Please don't hesitate in typing those into the relevant sections on your screen below. But now I'd like to hand over to Martin Valentine of modular house building company Positive Homes. And Martin will take you through some of the really good work he's been doing around delivering new homes in Newark, Nottinghamshire. Thank you.
Positive Homes, we're a relatively rare breed. We're a new SME house builder. There's not many of those. We're going about 5 years now, and our 5th development is on a tiny site that used to be owned by the NHS in Newark, just on the outside of Newark. And we managed to get 9 houses on that, which are all truly modern methods of construction, truly MMC, as in they come in completed boxes and are craned into position. So very exciting for us to watch in a week 9 houses appear from absolutely nowhere.
Yeah, and I mean, I was there. It was incredible to see it go from just foundations to 9 houses within a matter of days, really. And you touched a little bit in your previous answer, but what are the kind of main differences when it comes to traditional builds and modular builds? Well, first thing to say is that of the previous developments we've done, which were kind of flat pack timber frame, so that element goes up very quickly. However, all the other bits, all your internal trades and what have you, are all still done on site, just like a brick and block house would be done. So
The big fundamental difference is just the quality of it, is that when it's all done in a factory in a controlled environment, the quality is just so much better. It's so much more consistent. And from a developer's point of view, you want to know that the quality of plot 1 is the same as the quality of plot 9. And that's that. You see that right across the products that we've used. They're absolutely bang on the nail, really, really good. You know, and I can't imagine for the life of me I'll ever go back to doing it, you know, the traditional way. I just cannot see it.
Well, that leads in nicely to my next question. Do you think there will ever be a time in our future, and if so, how far in our future, when, you know, traditional housing will completely be a thing of the past and everything will be built in this modular way, maybe?
I don't know that it'll be entirely done that way, but I mean, take your cue from the way the car industry works. Houses are built today the way cars were originally built 100 years ago. They were built by craftspeople in a warehouse somewhere, in some sort of factory environment, but where each car was an individual item, crafted individually. And that's still how we build houses, in effect, even though, you know, the big builders all build out of a book of templates. They're all still built on site by a bunch of people who don't really know each other and don't really like each other, and are grumpy because it's cold and all those kind of things. Modular at the moment is great because you eliminate all those things, but at the same time, you are restricted somewhat by the footprint of the building and the designs. But you have to then say, look ahead and say, well, give it 10 years, give it 20 years. They're going to nail all that. It makes sense that you start with a small set of basic templates to work from. And as you get good at it, it becomes quite relatively simple to expand that out to many more. So I think, I've heard people say things like, oh, well, yes, modular will grow and but it'll never really replace the main building industry. I disagree. I think that we're now at a clear tipping point where, you know, the benefits of this are obvious. And of course, we need to get off our insular little island a bit and go and look at other places. Let's go to another island in the world like Japan, where almost all the houses are built modular. And it won't suit every site, it won't suit every location. There might be any number of reasons, you know, access, for example, why you can't have a factory-built house. But I can see a time when maybe 75 to 80% of houses are built this way. And I don't think that's that far away, certainly in my lifetime, I hope.
And today we are, of course, talking about modern methods of construction. So why is it so important that construction companies keep innovating and trying out these new ways and methods to, you know, work out what's going to work for our future, I suppose?
Well, at the risk of sounding controversial, the way we build houses today is a disgrace. It's just awful. I mean, I go back to that car analogy. When cars were built by craftspeople who really cared about what they're doing, well, you know, I've owned building sites and I've seen enough building sites to know that that often isn't the case, which is not to tar everybody with the same brush, because there's obviously a lot of very, very good people out there, and we've worked with a lot of very good people. But we've also found ourselves on the receiving end of some really, really poor quality work, where you end up spending twice as long chasing after it. And, you know, we've got to start knocking all that on the head. The whole culture of the industry, the whole way that it works has got to change. And it's a painful process. How we've ended up here, I don't really know, but we've got a whole bunch of people working as subcontractors who don't feel connected to the project. They don't feel like they're passionate about what they're doing. They don't feel they belong to it. You know, if you are in a factory environment where everybody works for the same employer, it's much easier to create the culture of quality and consistency that you need. And, you know, when you're asking people to shell out, you know, a six-figure sum for their first house, as we're doing, you know, you really want to be able to hand over the keys and know that they're getting something that's going to work. Not that might work, or that might, you know, not perform quite so well after 5 years. You want to know that it's going to work and it'll stay working. And, you know, that we really can't be doing that on a traditional building site with the best will in the world. Others will disagree with that, and that's fine. But, you know, there really is no alternative once you go down this road. You see the benefits of it. It's just everywhere. Of course, residential housing is just one sector where MMC can be put to good use, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you might have on a live Q&A soon. But first, it's time to hear from Tim Carey at Willmott Dixon, who'll tell you more about the other sectors where MMC is being implemented.
At Willmott Dixon, we've got a long track record in the use of off-site forms of construction or modern methods of construction, and those two terminologies are fairly interchangeable. So for the purpose of this discussion, we define off-site as really solutions that reduce the on-site labour element. And that's quite a broad spectrum of solutions. And the key thing to remember is that off-site is so much more than just modular. And really, we have an active plan to promote the use of offsite wherever we believe it adds value to a specific project, and that's really key. So too often I've seen in the past offsite solutions promoted purely for the sake of it, or for trying to meet the fashion of the moment. And then what you tend to find solutions that are shoehorned into projects that were never designed to benefit, and consequently those benefits never manifest themselves. So we'll always promote modern methods of construction and solutions that have high pre-manufactured value wherever they're appropriate. And part of determining where they're appropriate is to establish an appropriate feedback loop. So that also means that it's vital to collate the data that once you have used them, so you can actually find some quantifiable evidence to support the decisions that we make. From a selection point of view, the lessons that we've learned is that the earliest that we can identify the most appropriate solutions for any given project and we can implement those, the better they'll be adopted and the more wide-ranging the benefits will be. And that's the same with any design decision or procurement solution. So the longer we leave it in the process, the less tangible benefits we can do. And we know that that's especially aligned to the use of BIM and digital workflows. So the earlier that we can establish our BIM models, our procurement strategy, and our digital workflows around specific components, specific manufacturers, and specific forms of construction, including offsite, the more tangible benefits we can realise. In terms of the projects that could benefit most from modern methods of construction, really, I would say, to be generous, that it's all of them. And that's important to understand that statement in the context of what modern methods of construction can be. So they don't just have to be modular. They don't just have to be a panelised solution like timber frame. They could be something as small as modular wiring, or a sub-assembly and components of pre-manufactured plant room, an innovative window solution. And when you think about it in that context, there's very few projects that will fail to benefit from elements of pre-manufacturing or offsite. One example of where we've adopted modern methods of construction on one of Willmott Dixon's projects is the IBRB building for the University of Warwick. And we had a customer there that shared our desire to use offsite construction to minimise disruption on site, to focus on high levels of design for manufacture and assembly, and to incorporate offsite techniques. So on that particular project, we used a combination of approaches, which it included precast stairs, precast cores, CLT, cross-laminated timber, superstructure frame, precast concrete, and pre-manufactured plant rooms, all of which helped us to drive up the quality and drive down the programme duration on site.
Massive thanks to all of our speakers for sharing so many really interesting insights into the world of MMC. As you can see, I am now joined by all of our wonderful panellists. Thank you so much for taking time this Thursday afternoon to come and join us. And thank you everyone who is watching for asking your questions as well. It's fantastic to hear from you. We've got plenty of time to answer them, so by all means keep typing them in while we're having the Q&A. But for now, we'll get stuck in. So our first question is for you, Martin. This is from Ashley Walters at Blueprints. How did the use of off-site construction change the customer journey for your buyers? You know, were their expectations of timescales and quality different compared to those of traditional construction?
It's quite an interesting one. We're generally, our houses sell to people who are younger. They're typically first-time buyers, so they don't have that kind of baggage bringing with them. It's just like, oh, it's just a house. Oh, and it's just really well made. That's brilliant. You often see when the parents come round, who are a bit older, they might be a bit like, oh, I don't know about this. Where's all the bricks? I mean, of course, all the houses we've done up to now have all been flat pack timber frame, so maybe not brick and block, but they still go up faster than other houses. But at least you get to see it rising out the ground, and it takes a bit of time. With this, it's like, oh, the house has arrived, so when can I move in? I said, well, hang on a sec, we've still got to get the tarmac down, we've still got to get all that stuff. And of course, the weather, the specific site we've been doing in Newark, where the weather has just been so awful, has delayed us by about 3 months. So yes, you have a bit of frustration But actually, from an actual practical point of view, in terms of the house itself and whether that has any impact on their decision to buy or not buy, zero. No difference whatsoever. And I'm genuinely surprised by that. I did expect a lot more, well, is it fit for purpose? Will it last? Well, I don't know. And actually, no, none of that whatsoever. And I'm very pleased. It gives us a lot of confidence to carry on doing it this way.
It's so funny that you mentioned the weather, because everything that's happened this year, it's easy for us to forget that awful, the storms and everything, and the snow that we had in February.
Yes, yes. We were underwater for much of the development. There were 3 pumps going away at one time. Building on clay soil, don't do it. Doesn't matter what house you're putting on it. Just, if only we didn't have so much of it everywhere.
Absolutely. Now, next question is for you, Andrew. What are some of the reasons why some people or businesses maybe don't want to use off-site solutions, and how can the industry change these perceptions?
I think Martin hit on the point around perception there, and I think people's perceptions are changing at pace. You know, we're slow to adapt in the construction sector to innovation and doing things differently. And people are always looking for benchmarks. Where have we done this before? And actually, when you are trying to implement change and do things quite differently, it's difficult to make that evidence and make it tangible. I think the other point Martin picks up on is while we can make the construction and the development quite tangible and transparent in the benefits and the value it adds, there's still quite a lot of work to be done about the in-use benefits, so the life cycle, the planned and preventative maintenance, how people feel when they're in these buildings. Does it affect or help their health and well-being? So you know, it's really looking at the innovators in industry and the people who do want to make a change and do things differently that are really driving this agenda. And that's partly why I think, you know, we should look at modern methods of construction as a way of complementing what we do in the traditional way. Probably not as confident as Martin to see the swing of modern methods of construction totally taking over, but there's definitely a place for it, and actually not even taking a share of the pie, but, you know, making that marketplace bigger to increase volumes and deliver more projects in the UK.
It's really interesting hearing how all of your opinions, they're all kind of similar but slightly different. It's really interesting. Tim, this next one's for you, from Sarah Rome. She says that funding has always been the question mark over MMC, particularly modular. She knows that many high street lenders have got past this and will lend on individual properties. Do you have any insight on the current position on commercial lending?
Not specifically on commercial, but I used to be involved with Build Off-Site, and there's a thing called the Build Off-Site Property Assurance Scheme, which was initially set up to cover mortgageability of houses. So that's a shared initiative between Build Off-Site, Lloyd's Register, and BLP as an insurer. And so what that did was come up with criteria for certain systems that, if those systems were technically vetted and the manufacturing process was vetted as well, that lenders would be happy to assess that. I don't know whether or not that currently extends to commercial properties or anything outside of a core house, but I see no reason why, if you're using the system to create a different type of building and it's been technically vetted, I believe that BOPAS wouldn't have a barrier towards adopting that as well. So that I would recommend that people check out the BOPAS, BOPAS website.
Thank you, brilliant. Now, Martin, back to you for this one. Coming out of this coronavirus pandemic, another house building collapse is quite likely. Is MMC the answer to avoid this and ensure a strong post-coronavirus recovery for the market, would you say?
That's an interesting one. I mean, cost is everything. It's like if we're going to go through a period of recession, wages are depressed, banks are going to be nervous about lending, all those kind of things. I mean, fundamentally, we have to address the issue of why land is so expensive in this country, but that's a subject for another day. But yeah, the big reason for us as a small developer going down the MMC route is that we know what we're going to pay at the end of it at the beginning. So from a risk point of view, it's like I've signed the contract with one supplier and they're going to give me what I need and that's it. So I'm not worried in the last 2 weeks when suddenly I've got the plasterers holding me to ransom or the painters haven't turned in and suddenly I've got to do a load of things myself because I've run out of money to get someone to pay to do stuff. the certainty is there. And like I say, the quality is there. And so you add all that together, and it just seems to me like a bit of a no-brainer. And sometimes it takes a bit of a crisis to make people look at things they might otherwise not have looked at before, and said, well, let's give this a go. And I think this is an ideal opportunity. It's like I said, it's in my video, it's not for everybody because not every site will work, but it is a very good way of producing a lot of houses very quickly. And you see in the market now the fact that a lot of companies doing this are now growing, they're expanding, they're opening new factories, they're getting serious investment in. So yeah, the push is there. It's like I say, I think it is a tipping point. I see no reason why this shouldn't be how we power out of this.
It's going to be a very interesting kind of the next year, I think, is going to be interesting to see how it all kind of comes out in the wash, as it were. Andrew, the next one is for you. A report in 2005 by the National Audit Office identified MMC as a key development in the future of construction. However, uptake was initially quite slow on that. Why was this, do you think, and how have things changed since then?
2005, it's a long time ago now,
15 years, I know.
I think the market dynamics have changed massively since then, and I think it's widely accepted that in the residential market we're in a UK housing crisis. We've got clear vision on the availability of resource and that aging workforce, and the difficulties of attracting new people into the industry. When they've got so many other alternatives out there. And to some point that is also triggered around, what we pay the workforce in this sector compared to other sectors. So I think all of those factors were maybe contributing why back in 2005 we didn't see things moving forward at pace where we probably are doing so more now. Martin's points around sort of the impact of COVID-19. We've just undertaken a research paper for Homes England around the impact of COVID-19 on both traditional and off-site manufacturing. And there's quite a lot of evidence base there to show most traditional sites closed down fully, or productivity really dropped to really low levels, where many of the manufacturers in a more controlled working environment were able to keep their workforce coming in each day, delivering the product and gearing up ready for when those construction sites did reopen.
You mentioned pay just there, sorry Andrew, being considerably different in this sector in comparison to other sectors in 2005. Do you think that's still a problem now, or has that kind of resolved itself a little bit in recent years?
Pay is often dictated by supply and demand. We'll have probably all seen the headlines around, the difficulties of sourcing a good bricklaying gang, and therefore what they can charge as a unit cost. And again, that sort of goes back to, the cost per day or per hour of the resource, but then also the environment that they're working with and the unpredictability of that environment, especially when most build contracts are looking for a fixed price. So, the difficulty of offering somebody a fixed price when working outdoors for 12 months compared to indoors in a controlled environment, it must influence the commerciality of it, surely.
Absolutely, really interesting. Now, Tim, on to you. This one is from John McKay. At what point in the future do you see the wet trades being the minority on sites across the UK? Change needs to happen. Is it just a case of when?
Thanks, John. Good to hear from you. Is it a question of when? I think, as I kind of alluded to earlier, I think there'll always be a situation where it depends how you define wet trade, but if you include concrete frames, there'll always be times where modern methods of construction, factory built stuff, is not a suitable project because of load pass or because of the intent of that particular building. But where there is the opportunity to eradicate wet trades, then absolutely. And that's one of our missions, is to minimise wet trades wherever we can, because wherever you've got something that needs to be applied at the coalface, then all of a sudden you bring uncertainty in the process. It becomes weather dependent, it becomes labour dependent, you see quality drop as well. So as soon as possible would be my answer starting tomorrow. Thanks.
Nice and simple, really, there. Now, Andrew, back to you for this one. This is from David Watson at Geldards, or Geldards, I'm sorry if I've said that wrong. What is the emerging attitude of banks or building societies and other funders to MMC units, particularly in the residential sector?
Well, I'll comment from the projects that we've got underway and not necessarily on behalf of the bankers or the funding market. So we're working on off-site projects from one end of the scale, small infill, affordable housing sites, all the way up to hundreds of millions of pounds worth of value sat in the centre of Canary Wharf. So there's definitely funding there. You know, the technical response is a lot more robust now, so it gives the funders confidence, and the commercial response is a lot more robust. You know, no one is going to really jump on using off-site and modern methods of construction if it has a material impact on viability of projects. And I think we saw that as maybe one of the challenges a few years ago, that again, the perception was, okay, modern methods of construction, it's going to be faster in program, but it's going to be a lot more expensive, isn't it? And actually, the manufacturers are a lot better at what they do. If they're not performing a turnkey solution themselves, the contractors they're working with, such as Willmott, Dixon and others, understand the product better, understand how it needs to be managed and delivered. And that's helping everyone sharpen their pencils. So, you know, we often get asked, is it going to cost more? And we'd say, well, if it does, we're not going to use it, are we? So, but we've got to look at that at the holistic level, not just at the capital build cost level. So we need to understand how modern methods of construction's influencing the whole appraisal, and not just that capital build segment, which is very important, of course, but it's not the whole story.
No. Oh, very good, thank you. Now, Tim, back to you. This is from Tris Edwards. So what is Willmott Dixon's experience with achieving technical requirements such as fire and acoustics, where some aspects of compliance rely on the details where modular elements attach together?
I think that's a great question. And it's certainly something that's influencing our thinking of late. So the difficulty or the challenge that comes with any form of construction is the interfaces, where one element meets another. And that can be especially true with off-site, less so if it's something like modular, where the bulk of the element is constructed. But if you're starting to adopt different approaches and put together sub-assemblies and components that go together from various off-site manufacturers, there'll always be the interface details that create the risk or need the careful planning. So the way that it's influenced us is what we are starting to do internally within Willmott Dixon is to take more control of the design elements ourselves. So we're starting to do more and more in-house design. We've already had a track record of using proven systems and interfaces that we know. There's an online document that we use for design called the Yellow Book, which I can put a link up after this. Anyone's welcome to have a look at. So it's certainly influencing us. And I think if you do the hard work and you do the hard work right, then there's no reason why you can't comply with anything like technical and acoustics. The key then is to repeat it, because we do love to reinvent the wheel on every project and lose all of our learning. So get it right, do it again. Thank you.
You make it sound so simple.
I wish it was.
Now, Martin, we're coming back to you for this one. This is from Peter Conboy from Blueprints. Have you delivered any homes to lifetime home standards using a modular system? And how easy is it to make the changes at the manufacturing stage to meet the lifetime home standard? Is this something that needs to be addressed with a different approach, panelised or modular?
Yes, and that is a challenge, certainly. The one, like I was saying, the one weakness of going down the factory modular route is you do get what you're given to an extent. There is an element of customization available. Of course, the external finish can be anything you want, and you can choose your kitchens and your bathrooms and what have you. But the fundamental construction system, the way the chassis is built, if you think of it like a car again, it's a big steel box. If you've got to start allowing for where the lift might go in the future, or the width of doorways or anything like that, you have to design that in. And it doesn't make financial sense to design that as a one-off or even as a 100-off. You know, this sort of thing you need to have it on a production line and say, all these are going to be built to that standard. So from us as a sort of commercial private developer, it's It's not something I'm massively fussed about at this point. I think if they offered a Lifetime Homes thing as a standard product, I would take it. But to insist on it, I'm not quite there with that yet. I don't really have a need from my customer base to do it. From a housing, if you're a housing association or a council housing or a landlord, for example, then yes, you have to be able to do that. And it's certainly, we get our homes from ILCA, and they certainly have thought of that. Their starting point was work with councils and housing associations, so making things conform to minimum size regulations and what have you was a big thing for them. But in terms of Lifetime Homes, I think it'd be nice. It would be nice if the government just made it mandatory to say, you've got to do this. I'm 50 this year. In fact, I'm 50 at the end of the month. And I'm suddenly starting to think about how am I going to get upstairs in 20 years and things like that. It's like, maybe it's just my age, I don't know, but this sort of thing is really important as we age, as the population ages. So it needs to be done. And yes, I don't think they've got there yet. And obviously, if you're doing a bespoke house, that's very easy. You just get the architect to design it in and build it. So some work to go there is a short answer, I think.
Firstly, happy birthday for the end of the month, Martin. But secondly, do you think the government will ever make that mandatory? Can you see that happening in the near future?
Well, when you read things like, you read what other countries do, for example. It's like the average house size in Denmark is twice what it is in Britain. It's not exactly, they're not exactly blessed for space themselves, and you hear with the modular guys, they're saying, well, London's got this design standard, so we'll just design to that and work our way upwards. So this idea that you have to have the kind of lowest common denominator standard so that everyone can be the same. No. If there's anywhere set to higher standard, then for MMC, it makes sense to work to that standard. And then for everyone else will just raise their standard to that. Why wouldn't you? And we ought to have a consistent cycle of trying to improve standards rather than just accepting that it's too expensive or something. I don't think it is. And in a factory environment, it should never be too expensive because you should have the production line ability to work out, well, okay, if I can save £500 out of that process, I can spend that over there making this right. And it's just a system. You just need to think it and plan it and organise it and capture it, of course, and make sure you repeat it.
Yes. That's the message we're getting out of this, isn't it? We need to find the exact way of doing it and then repeat it, is what I'm hearing quite a few times from all of you. Tim, we'll come back to you for this one. This is from Jason McDonald. We've already seen MMC being embraced in the education sector with an increasing number of Category 1 schemes. Do you see other maybe non-residential sectors following in the short term?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that we've noticed is that there's so much when you look at it, there's so much commonality of design elements that can be applied across any number of sectors. And really, that's for me, that's one of the keys to enable to scale up. So one of the biggest problems with trying to get MMC off the ground is actually providing enough scale to the manufacturers to have the confidence to invest in capacity. And if we can't bridge that gap, then unfortunately what we're going to be left with is a current situation where we have a couple of manufacturers of scale, like your Ilke or your Legal & General, who are generally strongly financially backed, and then effectively quite a cottage industry underneath it. And what we need to grow the market full stop. So one of the reasons that we've identified that we can do that is if we can apply the same techniques that we've learned in education across any number of sectors, we can scale up our demand and aggregate our demand, which then helps us to then give our manufacturers a definitive pipeline of work, enabling them to scale up and deliver as well. So yes, 100%.
I was going to say, because you said earlier that you feel like MMC can be applied to any project, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things for me is that if you do MMC well, you shouldn't be able to walk down the road and spot an MMC project. And I think the more the industry talks about MMC being something different, the more it becomes something different. It just needs to become the new norm. And, part of that is just changing our mindset to it and actually, embracing the versatility of what it can provide.
Well, we're going back to a new normal, aren't we? So it could be the perfect time to make something become the new normal.
I'm not sure what's normal, but we'll see. Yeah,
yeah, time will tell. Andrew and Tim, you can probably both kind of dib in on this one. This is from Patrick Adey. When you're looking at purchasing a site, are there any particular issues or constraints you look at when you intend to use modular housing rather than traditional construction? For example, access issues or planning constraints. Andrew, I'll let you go first.
No real issues around planning constraints, because I think, as Tim said, the construction method methodology should be blind, really. You should be able to walk past the development and not really know if it's been built using modern methods of construction or traditional. And I see in the Q&A there's a question about, could modern methods of construction be used in conservation areas? Well, yes, it definitely could. We've delivered a project in a conservation area in London in recent years, and again, you walk past that development and you wouldn't know the construction methodology used. So in that regard's fine. In regards, a lot of people do perceive modern methods of construction just being the volumetric solution, the category 1 solution, and it's not. There's a real broad spectrum of what can be done off-site, and it doesn't have to be the whole of the build. A 60-70% PMV or manufactured value off-site would be a really good achievement. So most sites and solutions can adapt to deliver off-site, but obviously logistics is a key factor. So where are you manufacturing on site? How do you get the materials from that manufacturing base to the site? Is it normal loads? Is it abnormal roads? Are we going under low bridges? What's the access like? Is there sufficient room for craneage and the like? But these are probably all of the things that Tim's pre-contract team evaluate, whether it be on a traditional scheme or on an off-site scheme, really.
Tim, have you got anything you'd like to add to that?
I think Andrew's pretty much covered it, but it's, again, I don't necessarily see a barrier. There's always things to consider about the intrinsic nature of any particular site, but they're equally applicable to whether you use traditional forms of construction as well. So on this one, nothing further to add. Thanks.
That's all right, no problem. Now, Martin, next one for you. How do the production costs and sale prices differ on your MMC houses compared to a timber framed or a brick and block house? Are your profit margins greater?
Well, I couldn't possibly tell you how it compares to a brick and block house because I've never built one. In terms of cost, it's probably about the same as building a timber framed house, bearing in mind that all our houses are eco houses, so they're of a higher standard than your sort of basic built to building regs standard anyway. So we're already spending more than most. The great certainty, as I've said before, though, is that we know what it costs on day one. That makes such a difference. So it's like, how much profit we're going to make? Well, we've already sold this many, so yeah, it's looking pretty good. Cost-wise, well, I'm very happy if anybody wants it. I've got a one-page basic spreadsheet, and if anybody really wants it, there's a much longer one, which has all the costs broken down, and I'm not fussed about sharing it with anyone. So because I'm fairly evangelical about all this, and I think it's important that people do understand. We're talking about a EPC A-rated house. So that's the top 1% of all houses built in the country in the last 10 years. That's how bad our houses are built. But that's another story. So you get that, and you get a fixed price for it, and hopefully you know what you can sell it because you've done your market research into the area and all that sort of stuff. So you get that kind of certainty, and it compares very, very well with what we were doing before. And because if it didn't, we wouldn't do it. There just wouldn't be any logic in going down that road, because we are not about grand designs mansions. We're about first-time buyers in possibly harder to work areas and harder to sell areas, because we're only a small fish in a big pond, and we don't have access to green fields on the edge of villages like the big boys do.
No. Yes, absolutely, more's the pity. That leads quite nicely on to the next question, because someone's asking if a residential MMC property has a shorter lifespan than a traditional build, would a homeowner have difficulty extending the property?
In terms of lifespan, I'm told that the steel frame that our Ilka houses will survive for 200 years if fully immersed in water for the entire time. So that's pretty good. So it's just a bit like so if you drowned it, it would last.
That's an interesting way of testing a house.
I don't know how they did that, but anyway, it's at least 60 years. This is where the BOPAS stuff comes in. It's at least 60 years, and I know Ilka are pushing for 75 now. And the Top Hat, for example, another modular manufacturer, have already got 75. There's no reason why these things should not last for a very, very long time. And in fact, I'll wager that they're probably more likely to last for longer than a typical modern house, because, you know, they're done, as somebody said to me, everything that's meant to be dry in your house has always been dry. I'm thinking about all these building sites that shut up when the lockdown came, before the roofs got on and before the windows went in, and they've had, God knows, well, apart from the fact that it's been really sunny most of the time, they've had barrel loads of rain pouring into the structure for weeks. And I'd love to see what the snagging will be like on those houses 2 or 3 years down the line, when they're all swelling and grunting all over the place. Whereas everything in ours is built right. And if you build it right in the first place, it stays right. It's more likely to stay right anyway. So from that point of view, I think it's fine. In terms of the extension point of view, well, all you need to know is where your steel frame is. And then you just need some very long screws to screw into it. And you can do it. And one of the advantages of a standardized process is it's all there. It's all digital. You can have, I've done it where you put the 3D goggles on and you can wander around your house. You can see where all the cables are. You can see where all the pipes are. You know where the structure is. They can work out all the loading calculations. And yeah, if you want to bang a conservatory on, right, well, there's your fixing points, off you go. So not quite as straightforward maybe as knocking something up on a brick house, but that doesn't mean it can't be done.
No, very interesting. Thank you. Now, Andrew, this next one's for you from Andrea Hopkins. What is the pace of delivery per month for an MMC solution from a residential perspective?
Good question. So on a volumetric solution, a volumetric box predominantly fitted out and complete, on the high-rise developments we're doing in London and other regional cities, you're probably expecting 5, maybe 6 of those volumetric modules to be craned in per day. And let's say each one's 30 meters squared. So, you know, 150, 180 meters squared per day of fitted out space. In the factory environment, you're probably building those boxes on a 30 to 40 day turnaround. So it's very, you know, very productive compared to a traditional solution.
I'm impressed. That was impressive. That you got that answer straight away, Andrew. That was really amazing. I mean, thank you.
We typically see probably in the region of 25 to 30%, if not more, program saving on site.
Wow. That is really impressive, isn't it?
I think, having visited Martin's developments, they craned, you know, when they were fully productive following the high winds and bad weather, I think they craned in the 9 houses in just over a week. So they on site constructed 9 homes in a week. 5
days, I think, was it, Martin? Is that what you're? Yeah, 5 days. So yeah, incredible.
A working week. To
go from 0 to 9 in that length of time, it blew my mind when I saw it, because I was there that day as well. I was
going to say, I think that is one of the big advantages. You know, when we've got big problems in the UK around delivering affordable homes, homelessness, all of those sort of things, to be able to deliver at pace is a real big advantage.
Definitely vital. I would completely agree with that. Tim, next one for you. Is the industry reluctant to promote more MMC and off-site construction on the basis that it could put major contractors out of business, as much of their role is coordinating subcontractors on site?
Oh, I'll get my coat in that case. Just one point to add to the last answer, which is that I suppose it goes back to the point of saying that, you know, it's picking the right solution for the right project, because sometimes the speed of MMC is actually a disadvantage to a customer. So if we think about a project which might be something like a private rent, the end customer, the developer, will want as many units as quickly as possible so they can start to generate income. Some private sale developers might not want a whole load of units going over really quickly, because then they're unable to sell them as quickly as possible. So, you know, it's just a question of understanding the nuances of a particular customer. On that, I need you to, could you just repeat your
Of course I can. I was just going to say that just shows that there is still a need for both working in harmony, I suppose, isn't there?
Absolutely.
I'll repeat the question for you. So is the industry reluctant to promote more MMC and off-site construction on the basis it could put major contractors out of business, as much of their role is coordinating those subcontractors on site?
I think there's a very real risk that if contractors don't recognise that the world's changing and that they need to adapt, then they will go out of business. And that's probably no bad thing if people don't want to adapt and change. I think there's no shortage of promotion about MMC. You can't move for it in the press at the moment, and that's a really good thing. But I think those of us that are kind of relatively, well, not long in the tooth, but those of us that have been around have seen MMC come and go as fashions. And one of the dangers is that what happens is that as we get into recessions, traditional rates for traditional labourers like bricklayers and carpenters, they fall because there's less demand, and therefore MMC equivalently becomes more expensive. And then the industry then takes off again, rates go up, and then MMC takes off again. And what we need to do is we need to be able to break that cycle again through making sure that MMC is not seen as a premium product. So to answer the question directly, yes, main contractors make their money by taking on board risk and pricing risk, and by managing a whole load of parties to a contract to deliver an end product. And actually what we want to achieve as an industry is have less parties, less risk, more transparency through digital. So absolutely. So the main contractor's role does need to change and evolve. And that's what we're, shameless plug, but that's what we're trying to do at Willmott Dixon. So.
If you can't do a shameless plug right now, when can you?
Get one.
Martin, we've got one for you from Lynn Clancy. In relation to new builds, how well are planning authorities accepting their use?
That's an interesting question. I thought we'd get more grief over it. I'd be like, oh, I don't know about this. Actually, no, the opposite. At the best, we've had kind of ambivalence. It's like, what do you want to do? Oh, you want to build some houses, right? Great, well done. And occasionally you get, oh, this is interesting. This is new. This is the sort of thing we want to be seen to be supporting. It doesn't. Would it make a difference if you said, look, do you want to build some net zero carbon, super duper energy efficient houses for first time buyers that are affordable, that will make a genuine difference to the environment, that will involve all sorts of lovely green infrastructure while you're at it? Is that enough to get you planning permission if the councils think that you're outside of the rules that they've set for themselves? No. Now, actually, it should be because National Planning Policy Framework says it should be. However, the one council I'm dealing with at the moment say beg to differ. So they're not wowed at all by the fact that we're offering something that's completely the best you can do. They're not fussed at all. Others, say Chesterfield, for example, they were great. They were like, oh, fantastic, this is lovely. Newark and Sherwood were like, oh, you're going to build it in modular. That's fantastic, great. Well, we don't really care because we just care about how big it is and how much it overlooks the houses opposite. So they're not really that bothered. I think there's a certain element where you have to go to them and say, right, we've got to build this house to this footprint. And you can't then get into those discussions about, oh, can we have a sort of signature building on the entrance because we want that kind of 3-story thing and all that, or that kind of curve, those weird way that people build curved buildings, so where they do that weird thing on corners as people get, so why? That's another story. But you have to go and say, this is the product, this is what we can do. Oh, well, and you can't really get into much of a discussion about, well, can you tweak it, can you do it? Because the answer is no. So yeah, there is councils are very different all over the place, and how they interpret national rules and their own policies, I don't know. But it'll be interesting to see, I think, as we get into the next raft of local plans being drafted, to the extent to which they start insisting on, energy efficiency standards or using MMC or all these kind of things. And we've had 1 or 2 discussions of late with a couple of local authorities in the East Midlands who are heading down that route for certain. And obviously our idea is to try and capitalise on that by saying, well, we can do that. So let us do it.
Yes, absolutely. Just want to say we're running out of time, so I'm going to probably have time to ask one more question, but we've not had a chance to answer all of them, I'm afraid, which means that what we'll do is we'll ask the questions to our panellists after this, and they'll be able to get them out onto the ProCon's social media and website for you if your question hasn't been answered. Thank you so much for all the amazing questions that we've had, though. They've been brilliant. This next one's from Paul Hodson, and I'd quite like to open this to all of you, I think, because I think you all might be able to give us your experiences. So by all means, jump in if you'd like to give your thoughts. He's asking for any thoughts or experience of property insurer attitudes changing towards MMC properties.
Who wants to go first?
Martin, why not you go first?
Oh, all right. couple of interesting things on that. Obviously, from a new build point of view, you've got to get a 10-year warranty on the house. So that for us, NHBC have done a lot of work with ILCA. One of the reasons we chose them is that NHBC has spent 2 years working out a system warranty for the house. Now, we don't use NHBC and are never going to, but we use a company called Build Zone, and it was like, okay, Build Zone, are you prepared to warranty this house? Because if you're not, then the whole deal's off. In effect, we can't sell it. And they said, the short version was, if NHBC are prepared to warranty it, then we will as well. Just let us come around the factory and have a look. And that was that. So, hey, we got them another warranty provider. Brilliant, fantastic. And that was it. They were very happy because someone else had done all the legwork. In terms of household people buying the houses, it was quite interesting. Both of the 2 houses that are now occupied on our 9-home site in Newark, I sat down with both the buyers. We actually sat outside in the sun and where they got the laptop out, and we did the house insurance bit. We went through all the questions, and it came out, I think the first one, he came out and said, 125 quid a year for buildings and contents. Fantastic. Expecting it to be a bomb because it was different, and it wasn't. And nobody batted an eyelid at it. It was like, yeah, fill in the question, answer the questions honestly, done. And it was fine. Same with the mortgage people. You know, that we haven't. I expected to counter more problems with mortgages. Not been an issue at all. So, you know, so far so good.
That's good to hear. Now, Andrew, we'll let you have a quick word on that one if you'd like.
I think because there's the tests around the technical solution, the design, the manufacturing process are so stringent to get a BOPAS approval or similar approval. To some extent, that gives the insurers reassurance that things are being done right and correctly first time, because they're not dealing with, you know, the subcontractor who's tired on a Friday afternoon and has to get up to the 6th story of a building to fit a window type scenario. So in some ways, I think because the industry has geared up and the technical solutions are a lot better, a lot more transparent, they've been rigorously tested before the manufacturers are allowed to bring their products to market. I think to some extent the insurance companies are more reassured by that. We've not had any problems where end users have come along and said that they've not been able to get insurance, or their insurance is dramatically higher than what they would have expected. So probably similar to Martin, really.
Positive then, at least. And Tim, we'll let you have a final say on this one if there's anything you'd like to add.
No, just to say that our experience has been the same, really. The only thing we found from an insurance point of view is understandably a greater emphasis on the fire, safety and performance of all types of construction, but modern methods of construction as well. But again, nothing that we shouldn't be doing as a good industry. So.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, all three of you, for answering all those questions, and thank you for asking them. There were some incredible questions there. Like I say, the ones that we haven't been able to answer, I do apologise. We'll get those out on the ProCon website as soon as we can. But for now, I'd like to hand over to Will, who's going to bring today's webinar to a close. Will.
Thank you very much, Danielle. Yeah, I'd like to start, obviously, by thanking Andrew, Martin and Tim for some absolutely fascinating presentations. Really, obviously, very current, very engaging as well. I'd also like to thank everyone who helped put this webinar together. A lot of work's gone into it. Alison from Headstorm, Danielle and Tom and their teams at Cartwright Communications. I think it went all pretty smoothly. So thank you very much. And also, of course, thank you very much to all our attendees here. We've had over 100, I think I'm right in saying over 110. That is fantastic. And I was also glad to see that there were so many questions come up, which shows a real level in engagement. So thank you very much. And also, I just thought the panelists were excellent in fielding those questions. I don't think they were wrong-footed ones. Some great answers there. So thank you very much. If you enjoyed this, we do have some other webinars in the near future. We've got in the pipeline. The first of which is a webinar about the impact of COVID-19 on the legal, contractual and working practices in construction. That is taking place on the 14th of July at 2 p.m. We're also planning further webinars, I'm glad to say, on a variety of subjects, ranging from the island site, the building regulations, sustainability and passive house, BIM, social value, and also a virtual tour of the Roma Fabrics site. So there's some really interesting stuff coming up there. I really do hope you'll all be able to join us. Just a last little plug for ProCon Nottinghamshire. If you have been attending this webinar, you're not a member, we'd be delighted if you would join us. Details to contact us on our website, so by email, by phone, will appear in a few moments on the last slide. But ready to wrap up, just to thank you very much, everyone, for making this a really worthwhile first webinar for ProCon Nottinghamshire. That ends it, and I hope to see you all again soon. Thank you.